Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones, back here on Sunday evening, February 5th. Since the last episode, Purdue blew out Penn State before they took their second defeat of the season, this time coming at Assembly Hall against the rival Indiana Hoosiers. Purdue sits at 22-2 as of right now. They've got 7 games in Big Ten play left, and the Boilermakers are, as I record this, still number 1 in the AP poll. We'll see what they are tomorrow at noon, but they're still going to be a top 5 team. There's plenty to talk about, though, from the past week, so let's jump on in. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, at BoilersBeyond. Always good engagement there. Thank you guys who follow and who interact with me on the Twitter sphere. And then be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, because we are entering the heart of college basketball season with the NCAA tournament on the horizon. You will want to make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode to get you ready for the crunch time of the season. As I said, Purdue took down Penn State 80-60 on Wednesday night in Mackey Arena, and then they dropped the game down in Bloomington 79-74. Just some thoughts from the week, really. We don't need to recap the games too much. I thought Wednesday night, I give Purdue a ton of credit for how they came out against Penn State, because that was as prime of a trap game situation as you could possibly ask for. That was something that, I was worried about. I talked about it last week on the show here. You had a big game coming up on Saturday. Your rival, the whole state's talking about it. It's really, really big. And Purdue didn't buy into any of that. Purdue took care of business against Penn State. Penn State had a little run to tighten it up in the late first half, but outside of that, Purdue just dominated that game. Really good performance from Purdue that night. Micah Shrewsbury was fun to listen to after the game. He was so complimentary of Purdue and his good buddy Matt Painter. But at the end of the day, Purdue just dominated that game, and they put themselves in a good spot to go down to Indiana, because they hadn't bought into any they hadn't had a bad loss. And not that Indiana was a bad loss, but they were in a good spot where it wasn't some must-win game. Last thought from the Penn State game, obviously Mason Gillis was the story, hitting 9 threes, breaking the Mackey Arena men's record. That was pretty wild. That was awesome to see for him. He's a guy who works remarkably hard, a guy who does a lot of the little things well. To get him an opportunity, I guess, not get him, but for him to get an opportunity to go do something like that was really, really cool. It may never happen again where he hits 9 threes, but it was really cool that he was able to do that. And then, Purdue goes down to Bloomington and falls on Saturday, 79-74, a game where Indiana pretty much led throughout. And, I've been around plenty long here. Losses to Indiana are never fun. They don't go over well. But I don't think there is some tremendous amount to say about Saturday's game. Purdue didn't play a great game. Purdue had 16 turnovers on the game. 11 of those were in the first half. Of course, Purdue trailed by 15 at the break. They played a great second half, but it was all those turnovers in the first half that really did Purdue in. And when you look back on it, you just can't commit that many turnovers against a good team and expect to win much. Purdue's done this a little bit this year. They haven't had the turnover issues that last year's Purdue team did, but Purdue does have a tendency to commit turnovers, and they can snowball a little bit. One can lead to another really quick. And you saw with what Indiana was able to do. They got so much in transition in that first half off of Purdue turnovers. And I know Purdue fans don't like Trace Jackson Davis. I've seen enough tweets and message board posts. The guy's really good. He's a really good player. He exposed Purdue getting up and down the court really well when Purdue had turnover problems. Now, Purdue does a great job of keeping teams out of transition for the most part when they're not turning the ball over. But when you have those live ball turnovers, it gets really dangerous. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Indiana, though, for forcing some of those turnovers. They were really aggressive on the defensive end. They did a nice job of forcing Purdue's guards to catch the ball further out. They weren't catching the ball 2 feet off the three-point line. They were going out 5 to 7 feet, and it just slows down how Purdue can get in their offense. It makes Purdue uncomfortable. It really worked. Indiana had a nice game plan. And you saw when Purdue settled down and wasn't committing turnovers, they were just fine. It was just those turnovers early on that were a killer. Purdue's guards didn't have their best day. And, of course, part of that is hand in hand, right, with Indiana's strong defensive effort. But, looking at it, Fletcher Lawyer goes 4 of 12, 1 of 6 from 3, and he had some really good looks from 3. Braden Smith goes 1 of 8 from the floor, and he goes 2 for 4 from the free throw line. He's like a 92% free throw shooter, misses 2 of his 4 free throws. So, not everything was going Purdue's way, but it certainly was not a great day for Braden Smith or Fletcher Lawyer. I think, Zach Edey had 5 turnovers, so you have to at least acknowledge that. But my God, was he unbelievable. 33 points, 18 rebounds, 10 of his rebounds on the offensive end, 33 points on 15 for 19 from the field. That is remarkable. What Zach Edey is doing is remarkable. Just so incredible. The conversation was all about him and Trace Jackson Davis. And, Trace Jackson Davis has played well lately, has put Indiana in a much better spot than they were 3 weeks ago. He's really, really playing at a high level. That being said, Zach Edey's all but locked up the National Player of the Year race here. If you ask me, it is all but over. In these big games, when there are a lot of eyeballs on him, he is utterly dominating. And it's not that he's not in smaller games, but you look at the 2 games against Michigan State, both on prime, on national broadcast, on Fox and CBS, kind of the only games going on, a lot of eyeballs on him. He dominated. Indiana, arguably the game of the day in college basketball on Saturday, he goes for 33 and 18. He has National Player of the Year almost locked up at this point after just another ridiculous performance. This is one thing I need to point out, is that this is just one loss, and I wouldn't make it something bigger than it really is. I know losses to Indiana don't go over well. They're not fun. That losing in that rivalry is miserable for either side. But I think you need to look at how Purdue fought back in the second half as a real positive. Of course, you don't want to get into a habit of needing to fight back in the second half, but the way they competed, it was an unreal environment in Assembly Hall, it looked like. I wasn't there, but, that certainly had something to do with it. Purdue was missing free throws. Purdue was committing dumb turnovers. Purdue was not always in the right spot on defense. So I think you look at a lot of factors that all really could have been impacted by the environment, because it was something else down there. It's not a referendum on this team. I don't view it as a red flag at all. Look, they weren't going to go 30-1 into the Big Ten tournament. A loss was going to happen somewhere. So Purdue lost. You move on. And it's worth pointing out as well that Indiana is good. Much has been made of Indiana basketball over the past decade or so, but this is a pretty good IU team. They got a lot of preseason hype, and they probably, I still maintain, knowing everything that you knew over the summer, it made sense for them to be the Big Ten preseason favorite. But, you know, some of the hype might have gone a little too far. But they're a really good team. Trace Jackson-Davis was really good. You know, you saw how much Purdue respected him with how much they put an effort into getting the ball out of his hands. He does a great job. Jalen Hood-Schifino is really good too. He's a one-and-done guy. That's a good thing for the rest of the Big Ten, because if he were to come back for another year, he would be an absolute monster. He's a guy that, if you're Purdue, you're more than happy to just play one more time and then never see him again, because he's good. IU's bench didn't give you a ton, but it gave Indiana enough, and that early lead was enough to just kind of carry IU to the finish line. But a really good game, a game that I think when you look at what's next, you know, this Purdue team's going to play Indiana at Mackey Arena in 3 weeks, and I think you feel good about Purdue's chances there. Obviously, it's never easy to beat Indiana in that rivalry game, but I think you should feel good about where Purdue sits right now, and what Purdue is doing as a basketball team, because even though they got into some defensive issues, even though they committed too many turnovers, you know, Purdue still controlled that second half pretty good. They were just one shot away so many times, and they got good looks from three. Lawyer had some good looks. Caleb First had a wide open look, I remember, that didn't fall. Mason Gillis had a couple good looks that didn't fall. But that's basketball. That's reality. Purdue's still in great shape. Right now, they have a 2-game lead on Rutgers. They have 3 or more on everyone else. And looking at this week's schedule, Rutgers goes to Indiana. That's not going to be an easy game for Rutgers. So it is quite feasible that when Purdue takes the floor next, they would have a 3-game lead in the Big Ten with 7 to go. You know, I'm no mathematician here, but the numbers are in Purdue's favor, especially if Indiana can beat Rutgers. So we've reached the fun time where Purdue fans need to root for Indiana to win games to help Purdue in the Big Ten standings. You know, you look at it now. Purdue's 11-2 in the Big Ten, and you know that 16-4 will guarantee you at least a split. And unless Rutgers would have to win out for that to be a split and not an outright championship for Purdue. They have some difficult games still. You know, they play Indiana. We'll see about Iowa this week. They go to Maryland, is going to be a tough one. Illinois could be tough, but if Purdue can just defend its home court and not lose at Northwestern, and who else do they go? Oh, they play at Wisconsin, another game they could really win. I think you got to feel great about where Purdue's at. I think looking at the Big Ten race overall, the race for those double byes should be interesting. You got 5 teams tied for third right now. Purdue's played one more conference game than everyone. I noticed that. So it makes sense. Purdue had the couple weeks where they played 3 games. So they're a little bit ahead in the scheduling as well. That's probably good. Get them a little more rest down the stretch. Up next for Purdue, they've got Iowa, and they have Northwestern this week. Iowa, a 7 o'clock tip-off on Thursday in Mackey. And then Super Bowl Sunday. Who needs the NFL when you've got Purdue Northwestern, 2 p.m. Eastern tip-off from Welsh Ryan? A week where Purdue's going to be favored in both those games, probably pretty substantially over Iowa. We'll see what they are on the road at Northwestern. But, I think the priority number one is seeing Purdue respond well after a loss. I don't think this team has given you much of a reason to doubt their focus, to doubt their ability to bounce back. I don't think you've seen any reason for concern with this team, but, it is worth pointing out that they did not come out for that Ohio State game remarkably well after they lost to Rutgers. A lot of turnovers early on, couldn't make a shot, and then the game flipped. But we'll see how Purdue comes out after a loss. Iowa's a good team. They just got a big-time win over Illinois on Saturday. They're a good team. I don't know how good they are. You've got a guy like Chris Murray, who is really, really good. He gave Purdue some real problems last year when he was playing alongside Keegan. So it's a different situation now, but he's really good. Philip Rebracha has made some nice steps, but him guarding Zach Edey is quite the ask. That's going to be a tall task for him. You've got guys like Peyton Sanford. He's a good shooter. Tony Perkins can make some things happen, but I think overall, you look at this as a game where you feel pretty good about Purdue. It's the history of Iowa where they are pretty good on offense and not pretty good on defense. So, to a certain degree, you just wonder if Purdue's just going to simply outscore them. But it'll be a good test for Purdue's defense, too, because Iowa is very effective on offense. They do a great job of getting good looks. That's going to be a good test. And Northwestern on Sunday, I think they might be finally getting exposed as a little bit fraudulent. They were sitting up there in the Big Ten standings, then they had the COVID little pause, but Northwestern's not that good. They just got blown out by Michigan. They're playing Wisconsin right now in the first half. So I don't know what they're doing right now, but, Boo Buie, Chase Audige, they're not bad. They're good players. Audige is a great defender. But again, you go inside with them. Is Robbie Barron or Matthew Nicholson going to shut down Zach Edey? I don't know. Purdue's had a nice little run here against Northwestern in recent years, so they'd like to continue that. But when you're looking out at this, I don't think there's much of a reason to worry about Purdue at all. I know that loss stung. I know that, people were fired up. We got the message boards calling for Matt Painter already. So, it's what happens, but Purdue's in a great spot. And if you win these 2 games this week, you don't want to look too far ahead, but man, it's a process of elimination. You can clinch the Big Ten pretty quickly if you just keep winning. Easier said than done. No games are going to be a walk in the park, but I think it's hard not to like where Purdue is. They may or may not remain number 1 in the AP poll. I don't think it matters at all. Like you look at Joe Lunardi in his bracket, he had said, he was keeping Purdue at the number 1 overall seed, win or lose against Indiana. That's something to keep an eye on, that seed line race, because Purdue and Alabama both project on the 1 line right now, and if whoever is higher of those 2 teams would like to be in the South region, Elite 8, Sweet 16 would be in Louisville. Alabama wants it, obvious reasons. It's the closest to them, and it's the closest to Purdue, who remembers very well the type of turnout it could get in Louisville for an NCAA tournament game. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. But no, I don't have as many thoughts as normal today. There just isn't. I didn't have that much to take away from the game. Indiana played really well. Purdue did not play great, and Purdue lost by 5 to a good team on the road. It happens. That's part of basketball. Now we see how Purdue responds. I did have one question, a pretty good one, from Twitter. And it's about, as some of you are probably aware, the situation regarding the paint crew today and the women's basketball game and all of that. So, look, the question was, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the situation in the women's game today regarding paint crew tickets for next year and then the paint crew in general. I graduated in 2021 and feel like things have completely fallen apart. So yeah, if you didn't see it, hop on Twitter, check it out. Purdue Athletics put out a statement. Essentially, and I wasn't there for this, so I'm just kind of going off what I understand, but it was part of the coordinated effort to get a bunch of people to the women's game, that they were rewarding students who went to the women's game with a paint crew membership for next year, access to it. And there's only so many spots. So it was competitive, big crowd of people trying to get into Mackey. Sounds like people were cutting in line. Big crowd, people were running into each other and all that. A lot of people not happy on Twitter about this. And I'll just say, it is a very good problem to have that you have way too many students wanting to come to basketball games compared to the amount of student section tickets you have. You can turn on games any night from any conference, and there are not that many 100% full student sections. There just aren't. It is a somewhat of a problem across the country. There have been plenty of people who have written on this. I know Andy Staples had a good article on it, where in football as well, the attendance isn't what it used to be. And you certainly see that across the country. Not at Purdue. And you got to give credit to the Purdue students because they've supported really well. Even with football, they supported football incredibly well. And now with basketball, it's, been close to a 15-year thing with just a little gap in the middle of Purdue being really, really good. The paint crew and all of that being great at getting out and supporting the team. So, it's a good problem to have. I don't think it's some massive issue. I mean, I know the process of getting out paint crew tickets is a pain. It's highly competitive, but again, there's only so much you can do. Like you have to have some way of getting these tickets out. Like when I was at Purdue, I know they did it online one year, and that was a nightmare. The website kept crashing. People were in waiting rooms all day. That's not the best. That wasn't the best solution then either. Whether it is now, I don't know. You reward the kids for showing up. I mean, let's face it, they got the place sold out. It was a lot of IU fans, but the Purdue students showed up ultimately to watch the women's team get drilled, but they showed up. So I don't understand everything that's going on there, but people aren't happy about it. I thought people were upset about there being a bunch of trash outside. It's like, okay. I mean, are we shocked? It's a bunch of college kids. I mean, it happens. I don't think it's the end of the world. Purdue put out a statement. They're gonna get it taken care of, they say. So we'll see. But yeah, all of that to say, I don't have any big thoughts on that situation. And then the paint crew in general, I mean, look, Mackey's a great environment. It's really loud, and the students are the leading cause of that. It's different, at least, as someone who was in it and experienced it, there was a noticeable change from when Mitch Daniels said they're not doing hailfire anymore to when to now. That was a big change for the paint crew. And that was not something that paint crew leadership initiated. That came from Mitch Daniels. So I think a couple things. People were pissed off about that, about not playing hailfire anymore and yelling IU sucks. The year after that, the Purdue team wasn't very good and lost 4 or 5 games at home. And then you had COVID. So a lot of these things that, were kind of traditions or whatever. I don't know that tradition's the right word, but, everything lost a year. And, there was just less that you could do when there weren't games to go to, there wasn't anything going on. You weren't getting paint crew gatherings together. So I don't think anything's crazy different. I know people don't love that they yell sucks at the opposing team during warm-up or during intros. I think it's kind of high schoolish, but so be it. But overall, like these quote-unquote problems being problems are really good problems to have because it is a very engaged student base. It's a very engaged fan base. A lot of things are going very well for Purdue right now. This is going to be a 2-episode week. I'm going to record a football podcast to post midweek. Ryan Walters got his signing class inked, spoke with the media. We've got a much better idea of what the roster is going to look like here for spring practices starting in the next month or so. So I'm going to have something for you midweek, but that's all I have for today. Thank you, as always, for spending your time with me. Be sure to follow on Twitter @BoilersBeyond. Subscribe so that you don't miss that football stuff midweek. Tweet at me if you have any questions for that football episode too. Open to anything. Until then, though, guys, take care and get a good start to your week.